But they're training people, they're training a younger generation to think they're oppressed when in fact they're the most privileged generation of young people that have ever crossed the face of the earth. But I guess they're bored and they're doing too well in life and they have too many opportunities. So they have to pretend like they have some kind of generational battle to fight. Whereas in most cases, if they just live like normal people, you're not going to have any problems.
Good afternoon, you're watching Gript Media. I'm your host Fatima Gunning, and today I will be talking to cartoonist George Alexopoulos. George, welcome to the studio, welcome to Gript.
Thank you, this studio is lovely.
Could you tell us a little bit about your work?
Oh, well, I guess the stuff I'm known for is that I'm a current events / political cartoonist. In my off time, it's not my main job, it's just a hobby that kind of blew out of proportion. I've drawn a bunch of strips that are, I guess, known on Twitter, Instagram, other places, formerly Reddit. And yeah, I guess they get shared around, makes people chuckle a little bit. And but my actual full-time job is I'm a normal cartoonist / illustrator. But I don't think I'd be known for that as well.
And some of the work that you've done that I've seen, it is quite in the realm of political satire, if I can say that. I've seen a few of the ones you've done about US President Joe Biden, for example. Can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into that?
Well, he said an amazing quote one day of, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. He said this to a black man. And I recently learned that Greeks are black thanks to Netflix. So I was offended, my people are offended by this sort of thing. And so I took his quote, I'm joking, by the way. I took his quote of "you ain't black" and I illustrated it. He was, a black woman was saying, "I'll never vote for you." And then he responds, "Well, you ain't black." So he sucks the melanin out of her and she turns white and she passes out and he walks away like Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars. And, I guess, I did a series of those and a bunch of people thought those were funny. So I kept doing them and I kept doing them and they kept wanting more. And it sort of became a part-time job. And yeah, it kind of just grew more and, people said they want to see more of this. And, whenever you can find time in your schedule to make people happy, that's a good thing and get your name out there sort of thing.
And it seems like a lot of your stuff is quite non-PC. Do you think that the focus on political correctness and maybe censorship, has that kind of hindered your work or would it have added fuel to it? Is there more of a demand for kind of edgy stuff?
That's a fair question. Since I'm not working for any publications, I guess I don't have an editorial barrier to sort of what's acceptable and what's not. Really, the only boundaries to the sandbox that you can play in are what would get you kicked off Twitter or Instagram and that sort of thing. And I've been warned many times, hey, you need to delete this post or that sort of thing. I recently got kicked off of Patreon, or my account got frozen on Patreon because of a bunch of strips I'm sure that were offensive to them. And so that's the only place where you'll find boundaries. As far as my personal limits, I think shock is a tool of cartooning and comedy. If you could call my stuff comedy. Shock is a tool, just like, you have a bunch of crayons with different colors. And sometimes I use shock to get attention or to make a point or just to make myself laugh. And for the most part, people seem to tolerate my less tasteful jokes. I think as long as it would show up on South Park or Monty Python, I think personally I'm within my limits. I think that's fair to say.
Can you tell us a little bit about your own religiosity and how that informs your work?
Okay. Well, currently I'm agnostic and I was raised Protestant. Let me think. I guess they were called evangelical church, but it's sort of non-denominational. I was raised closer to Baptist. I don't know if you guys have the same denominations over there.
But mostly Catholic and Protestant, I think. We're kind of, that divide.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of close friends who are Catholic and stuff, and we're pretty much on the level as far as worldview and that sort of thing. As for my own raising, I mean, I was raised, Sunday school and stuff as a kid. I was told to believe X, Y, and Z, and I said I did, but I didn't really know what it meant. So I slipped away in my late teens, came back in my 20s, and I got into Christian apologetics like C.S. Lewis and stuff near Christianity. I really wanted to base my faith on, is this real? And what are the pieces of evidence I can base that on? And that I walked with that for many years, and then I sort of fell away thinking like, right now I'm in a position where I just want to, I don't know, I would be lying if I said I was like a true believer, because I just don't know too many things. But as far as my personal ethics and stuff, I still pretty much behave like a Christian, I suppose. I agree with a lot of things my Christian friends and family believe, and I respect their beliefs, and I'm open to coming back. I don't want to be dishonest and act like I'm spiritual or whatever.
One of your comics that I saw was, I believe it was Satan going to try and receive Holy Communion at a church, and then the priest saying, I am not going to give this to you at the moment, and because you're pro-choice, and then Satan being like, that's not your job, and the priest retorting with, that's exactly my job. Can you talk to us about that and what led you to draw that one?
Well, the punchline was that the devil was Nancy Pelosi. So the punchline is, he says, I'm sorry, I can't give you communion, Mrs. Pelosi. And it's just, the joke is that it's the devil, but it's actually her. And over here, we've got the Democrat Party, and they're very pro-choice. And, they seem to be running on the platform of their pro-choice, but actually it's more they're pro-abortion, in my opinion, which is different than saying you're pro-choice. I would leave room for that extra category. As for you're asking about my personal beliefs about pro-choice versus...
I wanted to bring up the topic of kind of Catholics and receiving Holy Communion, but people who are promoting things like, you say, the Democratic Party, for example. We had Joe Biden here quite recently, and he was welcomed with great applause even by like Catholic priests. And as you said, like this is a man who's the head of a party that does actively push things that are extremely anti-Christian and anti-Catholic. So just kind of your perspective on that, like the contradictions of that.
I remember there was a stink about that. Someone tried to deny him communion here. And there was a whole thing about that, like, oh, he should be able to receive it. I don't know exactly what the rules are for Catholics, but I would think that there is, obviously I've talked to you guys a little bit. There's contention within the Catholic Church of, should this be allowed? Should this not be? Is it murder? Is it not? And who's going to discuss these sorts of things? Can the priests decide? Like, I suppose, and this is a very spicy opinion. Like, it's not even my opinion. I'm just saying, what if abortion's murder, and a person goes to confession and says, yeah, I did it, can they then receive communion? I don't know. Technically, the Bible says if you hate someone or say you fool to them, you've committed murder. So where do you draw that line? I don't know. I'm not a priest, thank God. But I can understand that the pro-choice, it's such a sticky issue, and there's so much we could say about it. As far as what do I think whether churches should allow communion, I would not go to a church where the priest was okay or encouraged abortions, let's say that.
If somebody confesses, as a Catholic, if somebody goes and confesses their sin and receives the sacrament of reconciliation and absolution, I think they then can go ahead and receive Holy Communion. But then again, if you're someone like Biden, Nancy Pelosi, who actively campaign for this thing as a right and a good, then I don't know about that particularly. But while we're talking about things like morality, can you tell us a little bit about the book you made with Lauren Southern, The ABC of Morality?
Well, she wrote it, so she might be more of an expert about what each of the ABCs are. She wrote one page for every letter, and A is for such and such, B. And I just did the illustrations based on her descriptions. It was a pretty simple commission. I do these kinds of jobs often enough, and it was good to work with her. And I actually, because of that project, it's a children's book. I ended up making my own children's book as a sort of follow-up, but it's not really about morality at all. It's just supposed to be a non-woke, sweet rebuttal to the sort of politically charged children's books that are coming out now. Like we have Anti-Racist Baby, and it's obviously a racist book, but they claim to be anti-racist. So I wanted to make a cute, sweet children's book that was sort of like Winnie the Pooh-ish almost, where it's just a cute book about having an adventure and learning some nice life lessons.
Gooseberry Pie. That's your children's book. Can you tell us a
It's
little bit
very
about
sweet.
what led you to write it or to animate it?
Well, it was just a response to the cultural, there are a lot of woke books out there, and I wanted to make something classic and sweet. And it's actually for sale right now at my wife's shop. Like she made these little plushies of Strudel, he is his name. If anyone wants to get these or anything like it, she makes clothes for children and stuff. It's Polkadot, Pokidot, at Etsy. There's a shop called Etsy, or polkadot.etsy.com. But yeah, we wanted to make a children's shop, and it's her shop. I just made the book for her shop, and she sells other things. The idea was that we wanted to, like, my comics are pretty sarcastic and dark and adult and sometimes inappropriate, but we wanted to make something that's for all ages and really sweet. And the book is kind of designed language-wise to be read to children. Children can look at all the pictures. There's like 50 pages of nice pictures, but it's really about like, you're going to bed, let's read some pages. I even had a family friend who's a teacher read the book to her class over the course of weeks. And then I got to visit the class and read to them, and they made all these like little drawings of the main character and stuff. And I thought that was the funniest, most ironic thing, because, you know, over here we have Drag Queen Story Hour, if you've heard of that.
We have.
And I wanted to brag that I was, you know, I am now a children's book author who got to read to kids in a school. But then I, as a regular person, I'm like, wait, that would seem creepy to me. Who would brag that I got to read to children? And then I'm like, like, it's perfectly normal and sweet, and I think it's private, and the kids shouldn't be used as, you know, sales pitches. Like, hey, I got to read to these kids. So more points for me, but I never announced it anyway. Kids love it. Parents love it.
You didn't go in a dress and makeup, I assume.
Not this time. Although we were joking that I should put some lipstick on afterwards. But I don't know if people would take that joke very well. Like, I have a shirt that says Blacks for Trump, but it's written in Greek font. I don't know if you guys know this joke where Netflix is doing a Cleopatra adaptation or
with
something.
Jada Pinkett Smith, and they've cast a black actress as Cleopatra, who was, as you
Right,
said, Greek.
so, indeed. So Blacks for Trump. I was rejoicing.
Okay.
I've always said this, like, Africa, right? Not to waste your time. The Greek word for foam is afro.
Mhm.
And who has afros? Africans. So I'm black.
All right. Very good. I was thinking, I don't know. There's a lot of that going on these days where, you know, they're saying that wherever people live now is where they're from, which I find it like quite bizarre. Like I heard on the radio today that a family from Somalia were from Westmeath, which, you know, I think it's a bit funny. Like by that logic, I'm from Tokyo. I'm Japanese. I lived there before for several years.
Were you born there?
No, I was born here. But it's like, you don't have to be born from somewhere or grow up somewhere to be from there, according to this kind of political correctness. Can you expand on Anti-Racist Baby? That kind of made my ears like prick up a bit.
I have a copy behind me. I could grab it. I have a copy to study my opponents, let's say, not because I enjoy the book. It's a piece of crap. It's about teaching your children to be activists, basically, because they live in a, quote, racist world. So this is how you would train your child to be aware of all the disadvantages they have because of the color of their skin. And I wanted to make something classic that just give them a counter slap in the face. And
So I'm just thinking, it has to be a really, really depressing and disheartening message to tell a small child that, hey, because you're black or because you're brown or because you're yellow, people don't like you. That's horrible.
It's kind of like if you run up to someone holding a shield up and you know, you have a sword And I'm just a normal guy in the street, and someone comes at me with a shield. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you trying to fight me? And he's like, you're trying to attack me, so I've got to put my shield up. And then that puts my guard up. If you walk around without your guard up, and it's like, oh, I actually don't live in a world that hates me. Maybe some people do hate me because of my ethnicity or because I'm too handsome or something. That happens to me all the time. I'm just kidding. If, I think but they're training people, they're training a younger generation to think they're oppressed when in fact they're the most privileged generation of young people that have ever crossed the face of the earth. But I guess they're bored and they're doing too well in life and they have too many opportunities. So they have to pretend like they have some kind of generational battle to fight. Whereas in most cases, if they just live like normal people, you're not going to have any problems.
And in terms of the censorship again, I noticed that last week, Matt Walsh, who I'm sure you're aware of, he was suspended, I believe. His YouTube was suspended. I think he says because he refuses to use preferred pronouns for transgender people. What, in your experience, like what is the line that has gotten you kind of warnings?
Oh man, definitely trans jokes. I once drew, can I say, this is going to be edited? All right. I drew a Hitler comic once. It was about, do you guys have Sesame Street over there?
We do. I know what it is, yeah.
Okay. There was a quote where some dad was telling his kid, they were both black, some people are different based on their race. And that makes some people different than others. And I don't remember the exact quote, but if I race swapped the dad in Sesame Street with Hitler, it would sound perfect coming out of his mouth. And it's like, so the comic was Hitler is now saying the quote coming from Sesame Street. And so that got taken off Instagram, for instance. I also drew a comic where there was a Confederate flag. I don't know if you guys are familiar.
Can you give a little bit of a brief explanation of what that is, just for anyone who's not familiar?
The Civil War, in America, there was the Confederates, and well, anyway, so there was the South flag was the Confederates, and they have a flag that's sort of like an X with stars in it. And the joke was an FBI agent was dressing up like a rebel Confederate and saying, "Hey, praise Trump and pass the ammo." And my Etsy shop forced me to take that comic down because it had a Confederate flag in it. And they considered it a hate symbol. There have been multiple instances where comics like that get taken down because, let's say I get too close to the nerve. And there are some things you're not allowed to make fun of. Technically, I have the free speech to make those comics, but the platforms also have the right to warn me to take those down, or I will lose my account, or I'll lose my income. And that has happened multiple times. But I suppose it's their First Amendment free speech right to take down my free speech off their platform. They're not technically silencing me. They're just silencing me on their platform. So it's in this gray area. There's nothing I can really do about it except turn it into more jokes, which I've been trying to do.
And what platform do you have the biggest reach on?
I would say Twitter, except my account has been polluted with there are rumors that conservatives here have had their accounts sort of, I would say, nerfed, if that makes sense, like shadow banned. I have 150 something thousand followers on Twitter, but I have less reach on Twitter than I do on Instagram, where I have half the followers, and I can't explain why. There just seems to be a cloud over my account on Twitter that Elon hasn't been able to get out of. There are some conservatives who are saying not as many people are seeing my posts, and we don't know why.
Sorry, would you have noticed any kind of change to the way Twitter interaction works since Elon Musk took over, or is it more or less the same?
It seems there was a legacy or grandfathered tagging system where if a lot of leftists blocked me, my account is de-ranked when it comes, like people can find my stuff if they search for me. I think I've been more visible since Elon took over, but I hear there's still weird code deep in there that they can't find, or they can't get rid of unless they rebuild Twitter from scratch. So like, for instance, I verified my account for the low price of $8 a month, and I seem to be getting a little more engagement, but not nearly as much as I think I should. But then again, I've seen other huge accounts not get a lot of engagement either. So it seems to be a system-wide problem.
Can you tell us a little bit about your new project with Razor Fist?
Sure. Razor Fist is writing a story called Ghost of the Badlands. It's a Western set in the late 1800s in Arizona. And I'm illustrating it and running a Indiegogo campaign for it. We were fortunate enough to achieve our initial goal was $50,000 to be raised within 30 days. And we ended up raising $50,000 in 2 hours. And after, I think it's been maybe 4 or 5 days, we've raised $175,000 so far. It's going to be a 100-page graphic novel, and it's going to release, I think, in autumn or winter of this year.
And like, in terms of, I suppose, living in the US these days is it fair to call you're kind of a conservative? Like, I don't want to kind of box you in. It's kind of...
That's fair.
There's only 2 words. It seems like there's a lot of breadth between those 2 words, but we only have the 2. What is it like what is it like in terms of just living every day, like the political discourse between people? Because from this side of the pond, like, we see things that are quite negative about the US in news headlines. So like, what is it like? Is it really that adversarial, or are we just picking up the bad stuff?
Online, it's very adversarial. If a leftist online talks to a conservative, it's just going to be cats fighting. You know how cats just walk up to each other and start screaming. But on the street, you almost never notice. It's very passive aggressive where I live. I live in a pretty left-leaning area near New York, in the suburbs. So you'll see people with like F Biden flags here and there. And then you'll also see people with Black Lives Matter and rainbow flags all over their lawns. And I think it's sort of a passive aggressive, oh, it's one of those people. Let's not talk to them. They look like jerks. But, you know, I don't have any signals as I'm walking down the street. My face isn't known, so nobody would look at me in a weird way or anything. But if I see somebody with blue hair, I might say, oh, or somebody with a mask now. For me, the mask is a sign that they're a leftist here. So it's like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be friendly, or they're not going to be friendly with me. So, but no, I don't see, there's no protests around where I see people getting hit in the head with apples or anything. I don't go to protests anyway. Online, it seems a lot worse than it actually is here on the street, which is why, like, I'll disagree with the argument that there's going to be some kind of civil war here. I don't think so. But I have heard over, like, say in Ireland, conservatives here are considered like very far right leaning, which is very strange to me because conservatives here are pretty mild, actually. There's even, a lot of in discussion about, like, how do we handle the abortion debate or transgender debate, or even like homosexual adoption. That's a kind of a hot issue for us right now. And I think it's been pretty civil, a little hot, but pretty civil when people discuss it.
And what was the reaction to Donald Trump recently saying that I think he said that he would leave the abortion as it is, kind of for each state to decide? What was that like?
I don't know what the universal reaction would be, but as someone who voted for Trump, I actually agree with that. I think there's a discussion here about states' rights versus federal oversight. Telling, like, for instance, trying to take away guns from certain people in some states. I live in a very strong anti-gun state. And if that bothers me enough, I would like to leave my state and go to a pro-gun state, for instance. So Americans could and should, I think, have 50 options to move to a state where they feel the most comfortable and they have laws there that they agree with the most. Now, I would love for abortion to stop all over the country. But I was talking about this the other day with someone. I don't think this problem can be solved through legislation. I think people's hearts need to be changed. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I fear when people legislate things like abortion too much, it hardens the heart and makes people dig into their beliefs. So to the point where you'll see people, they have hashtag shout your abortion, or like people bragging about how many they've had, women, not people, women bragging about how many abortions they've had. And that's, I think, a reaction to, it's like a defensive reaction. Like when a porcupine shows their spikes or whatever, it's like, hey, look how pissed off I can get you. I've got 50 million abortions. And it's like, they're saying that to upset the other side, not because they're proud of it.
Right, and I suppose they're trying to normalize it as well. And like, I would agree that it is a symptom rather than a cause. Like, it's kind of a symptom of a society that doesn't view like human life as that important, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. I've always suspected there's some deep cults where like child sacrifice is still a thing that they do. I would believe that. But for the common person who wants to have options, like abortion is an option. Like if I was a woman who wanted to have that option just in case, maybe it's something they would do with deep regret, and or something that they would consider doing, but maybe they would change their mind at the last minute. There's many stories like that. I do think it's a horrifying thing. I've seen, pictures of what it looks like and what they do with the bodies afterwards, and like recycling it and doing all kinds of creepy stuff. And I would love for it to stop. I would love for it to just slow down. But if I was trying to persuade, like if I was talking to someone who was considering getting one in front of me, I would not say, you can't do that, that's murder. I don't think that's persuasive at all. I would try to show them compassion and try to see, hey, there's options. There's many people regret doing it. There's a million different options you have, and just try to persuade them gently. Like, again, coming from the angle of Christianity, it's very based in grace, and it's not about throwing the law at people. Maybe some Christians would disagree, but I've always thought that it's about, we're all sinners, we've all made mistakes. God loves you anyway. You can ask him to give you like supernatural, you can make decisions that are not natural to you, even if you want to, and he'll give you, the Bible claims, and I want to believe, he'll give you a new heart, new desires. So you don't have to make these decisions. So, but that's a harder discussion to have than just hashtag don't do it, because that makes people, defensive. Nobody wants to hear, hey, you're a sinner, you're a bad person, you're a murderer. And that would be hypocritical anyway. Anyone who calls another person a sinner is a hypocrite anyways.
We're all kind of equally tarred there, everybody has their flaws, and everyone, that's what the Bible says, like we're all there. Like in Ireland we have, there's a lot of talk about kind of far right, like anyone who wants to question things related to immigration. Far right, there's no debate at all. Like you can't talk about it. You're just far right. You're a Nazi. You're deplatformed almost.
Well, I don't want to get you guys in trouble, but my opinion is your country and many European countries have been infiltrated by, I don't even know what this group is. They want to take away national identities and just say, hey, we're all the same species. Nations and ethnicity doesn't exist. And they want to turn the world into this mush of, like, let's not have any identity or culture or history anymore. Let's erase all history and make Cleopatra black. Or, like, I don't mind if it's true, but don't lie.
Right.
I don't like, America is different, of course, because everybody migrated here. My grandparents came here in the 60s. I was born here. So I would just say I'm American. My family, my ethnicity is Greek, but I can't pretend like I'm from another country. But if someone is ethnically Irish or something, I think that's something that's beautiful and should be preserved and celebrated and should not be insulted if they say, we have thousands of years of history here and we want to keep it. We want to keep our old language and our old art and artifacts and culture. And we want to preserve it and honor it. That's not far right. That's beautiful. You should preserve.
Right, and especially in a context where we're told that we should celebrate diversity, it's like, well, isn't being Irish and Irishness, isn't that part of diversity? Like, why can't we keep that? And there's a narrative that that's excluding other people. Like, even if you look at this year's St. Patrick's Day parade, you would have seen people from all over the world, like Venezuelan dancers, people from Georgia. There were no Irish dancers that I saw. So it seemed like it was more like an international day parade, and very little of it was obviously Irish or about St. Patrick.
You know, it's funny because they talk about cultural appropriation all the time, where I can't dress up like a Mexican for Halloween, but they can take other cultures from other countries and dress up and say that they are from, like, obviously, you know, I have the mental image of red-haired, green-eyed person from Ireland, you know, but obviously that's not the case in all cases. But they want to create this fiction where, like, there was a video game that came out not too long ago called Kingdom Come Deliverance that took place in Bohemia, if I remember. And there was a lot of criticism because there were only white people in it, even though it took place in like the 1500s. And it's like, there was nobody else except white people in Europe at that time, Northern Europe. Mm-hmm. Like, you're just trying to rewrite history and you're just lying. My objection is to the lying. If you're telling the truth, like, there was one black samurai in Japan in the 1800s. That's interesting. That's real. That's history. But don't act like, well, I want to get myself in trouble.
I mean, even with some kind of more modern adaptations of things like Jane Austen novels, there is, they're kind of putting people who wouldn't have been in England at that time, or if they were, they probably wouldn't have been in those positions. It doesn't really, it just kind of seems very inauthentic. Like, why can't they just make new cool stories that are inclusive?
Yeah, I had the same criticism with Hogwarts Legacy that just came out, the Harry Potter game. They, a lot of rainbow people were complaining about J.K. Rowling, she's a TERF or something stupid like that, which she's whatever, I don't care. But they ended up putting in the game that takes place in the 1800s in Scotland, 1 million Asian people and 1 million like people from Africa, Indian, and maybe Indian. I would maybe buy that, but like, there's more non-white people in Hogwarts in Scotland in 1800 than there are white people. And I'm just walking around the school like, and Hogsmeade in the game. I'm like, what are you doing? You're just making things up now. And obviously this is a game where you can cast spells and fly in a broom. I get that. But it's a bunch of baloney is what I'm saying. It's rewriting history, and that's what commies do. And I don't like commies.
Right, and they don't seem to take on board the huge human cost of communism in the 20th century. Like, those huge figures, millions of deaths, don't seem to really faze them in their lauding of this ideology.
No, I think it's a lot of people in their 20s going through their Messiah phase, Messianic phase. They want to change the world. They're fresh out of college. They want to feel special, and they're just latching on to whatever they think is going to save the world, whatever their professors tell them. The world has this one problem, and if we solve it, if we liquidate these bad people, maybe put them on trains or something in camps, I don't know, then the world will be saved. This is not the first time 20-somethings have been stupid. I was 20, and I'm still stupid when I'm in my 30s. So before I try to criticize the world, there's that saying of take the plank out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of someone else's. Try to fix your own life, and then maybe you can try to fix society. But they're getting it backwards.